Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, February 16th. So, yeah. Weirdly, I'm still not seeing like a lot of new information here since the 13th. They kind of flooded us. Well, it wasn't that many announcements here. It was 3 on the 13th and then it's just been totally silent. There's just a single issue here. Yeah, and for the accountability section, I guess early today, we can say I've been mostly playing still Sudoku, so that means I have been launching Yu-Gi-Oh! In the background to use it for background music, since Cracking the Cryptic game on Steam literally has no sound effects in it, no background music or anything like that. The good news is I have like 3 more episodes, but they're going to be short episodes left to record as far as Cracking the Cryptic, and then I'm just done with Cracking the Cryptic and probably Sudoku in general. Like, it would, the only thing I could think is I would get like classic Sudoku from Studio Goya, or I'd get a different Sudoku game from a different person completely. I think there is very possibly a case here where the Sudoku community is just too small and possibly, I will say, maybe a little too insular, and that it's just not a community that's really designed around welcoming new people to Sudoku, which would certainly explain why Cracking the Cryptic as a game has basically no tutorials. I mean, it doesn't basically have no tutorials, it has no tutorials. We'll play 2-star Heroes Bound, although Harpy Ladies loaner deck worked pretty good. My security camera network video recorder, which I always want to call it a DVR, but come to think of it, if you did have a security camera DVR that was not connected to the network, that would be a pretty old device and not very helpful for what you would want. But yeah, it seemingly broke, and so I plugged in the hard drive into my computer and spent a lot of time trying to see what the hard drive could do, and yeah, I was unable to recover anything from the hard drive at all. The master boot partition, the master boot record, was completely missing, and the every attempt I had to try and recover from that really just didn't work. But then I was able to format it and just create a new master boot partition, which, I mean, it'll be, hopefully it's not so physically broken that the hard drive was the problem that broke the NVR, because I've ordered a new NVR, but I do want to put just the old hard drive, or at least an old hard drive in it. I don't want to have to buy a new hard drive, although it would just be buying a bigger hard drive that would last longer. But particularly for a network video recorder, there's always reason to double the size and have twice as long of the recordings saved up, or twice as many recordings saved up. Let's see, what are we gonna special summon this one, I guess. These are the second anime series characters that elemental hero characters that I feel like they are fairly expensive to play, in the sense that they take a lot of time to cycle through a bunch of actions. Why did that even ask me that question? And I have to ask, what was the point of that? Yeah, when there was only 2 available fusion monsters, it should have just automatically skipped that step. Of course, the part that can go wrong, certainly, is that I could get a new NVR, plug in the old hard drive, immediately break the new NVR, then realize I needed to order a hard drive, and probably just, at that point, everything is just going to have to be considered suspect. Oh, seriously? No, don't summon that. But this is a SATA hard drive. There really shouldn't be anything going on there that would physically break one thing or the other. What I'm hoping is the case, and there's really no way to prove this, other than I put the hard drive into my computer and my computer didn't blow up through a USB SATA adapter. What I suspect would be the case is that the capacitor or some power rail is just broken, just shorted out. Some capacitor dried up on a cheap Chinese network NVR. And honestly, I don't know if there really are any brand names in NVRs that are at a reasonable price just for a house. If you are buying an NVR, I would say keep an eye out and try and get one that supports H.255, not H.254. That'll be about 1/10 of the amount of space for the video recordings with that higher compression level. It is not just a software thing though. You need a specialized, more modern video processing chip, and the video processing chips in the NVRs are going to be customly picked to whatever device it is, and how many connected devices are there. I would also say go wired. You really should go wired in everything, which is a ridiculous statement to say considering how many wireless smart devices I have. But yeah, particularly if you're building a new house, you should just have network wiring going everywhere, but a lot of smart devices frankly just don't have the capability of being network wired. The ESP32 that runs a significant, or the family of ESP32 chips now, that runs almost all Internet of Things smart devices, it doesn't inherently have a Ethernet wire pin. You could do it, certainly, but there's no standard there. You probably would have to have the ESP32 custom program to talk to another chip to connect to a power over Ethernet or Ethernet connection. Power over Ethernet would make a great amount of sense. But even now in the United States, where I think pretty much all the states in the United States now require new buildings to have wired and interconnected smoke detectors, there's no requirement that they are wired and interconnected in any way to a network connection. If anything, I think a lot of people probably wouldn't want them connected to a network connection. So the wiring and the interconnection between smoke detectors uses a different system, completely a non-digital system basically. So yeah, if you were building a new house, you basically should wire everything that way. Every windowsill, every door frame should have wiring on one side of it, if not maybe both sides of it. Every place a smoke detector or security camera might be, there should be a point there. Smart bulbs would be very hard to have them be wired into a network, but it really should be even that way done that way. Part of the problem with the adoption of wired networking, though, is the fact that the RJ45 Ethernet connections that are the standard, unless you're going optical and for everything, and most people wouldn't afford for that, and it's probably not necessary inside a house. But the RJ45s are just not designed well for smaller numbers of wires or just smaller devices. The 2-wire interface of like CAN bus should be a standard instead for smart devices. And then there would be just like one CAN bus gateway built into the center of the house that would then connect to an RJ45 and a network. Yeah. And running 2 wires to a lot of locations makes a lot of sense instead of running just 8 wires, which is what you would do for Ethernet and RJ45. But you still have to run Ethernet to every room for good home networking, if not multiple walls in each room. Weirdly, I kind of don't remember what I've been doing for the past couple days otherwise. I know I took a lot of time off and I did a lot of scheduling and making of macros. I did realize now that I'm nearly at the end of making these super long videos playing Sudoku puzzles that I should have been back to streaming that to Twitch to try to get enough concurrent followers on Twitch to be able to upload videos to Twitch, but that didn't even occur to me, and that might have worked fairly well just because they were 3-4 hour long episodes, and that is what Twitch really wants, is for you to stream for 3 to 4 hours a minimum. But then Twitch also, it really wants you to stream for 3 to 4 hours 4 to 7 days a week and get lucky, be part of the Twitch affiliate program, or even get higher privileges on Twitch. But yeah, I guess that's mostly what I've been doing. Maybe I don't feel like I've been sleeping more, or that I was doing anything else, but it does just seem like Sudoku took so incredibly long the past couple days, and I've forgotten all that time I spent on Sudoku, that it now just comes up empty in my mind. which feels like a waste, certainly. I am, in general, doing better on YouTube, but unless I got like 3,000 extra watch hours, it's not likely that I'd start to be able to run ads on YouTube and for any time in the foreseeable future. At the current rate, if everything was just going as good as it is going right now, and it doesn't snowball in the sense of just subscribers and watch time just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I would have to assume that it would be at least first quarter of 2025 before I would be monetized. At least. Probably a lot longer. Now if it does snowball, then there's just no controlling that. At any point any YouTuber could succeed on a very high level. Don't know what to do, but I think you're safe doing this. Nope. I'm pretty sure this isn't going to work. So yeah, started a little late. I think the later streams might help a little bit too. But as far as watch time, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, but very little of it is video game news. And that is probably the biggest story we should talk about. And we'll just very quickly move into the main topic discussions, which is, I guess, what I should be calling the section, that section. There's way too many rumors going on for Microsoft's comfort. There was way too many rumors going on, and so then Microsoft put out an update and put out a podcast, and in the update and podcast we'll get into the details later, but for the most part it is just absolutely nothing really that interesting that was said. The details do tell us a few things, but the vast majority of all the rumors were insanely blown out and exaggerated from what was actually announced, and most of the rumors were not even anywhere close to being connected to what was actually announced. Now what's funny is a lot of the rumor mongers, the exact same people who were spreading and reacting to rumors as if they were fact, in reporting on what was actually said from Microsoft, are still guesstimating and trying to rumor mill, because there's a very specific thing that Microsoft said, that they've decided 4 games are going to go multi-platform, probably to PlayStation is the thought there. But they didn't announce what those 4 games are because they already have a plan as far as making those announcements, and they're not changing those plans. You could speculate and that maybe it's not 100% in the hands of Microsoft as far as some of those announcements, since they would be multi-platform. But yeah, to say 4 games are going multi-platform from Microsoft doesn't really mean anything, because games have gone to the Switch from Microsoft already. So this isn't like the first time this has ever happened, and I'm pretty sure even a couple of Microsoft games have gone to PlayStation before. They did specifically say that Starfield and Indiana Jones are not in the list of the 4 games that are going multi-platform. It was really just a 20-minute video to say we have nothing new and nothing's changed, which arguably rumor control needs to happen a little bit better, but I really am starting to wonder more and more now if this wasn't just a case of one of the many people who have been laid off, one or more of the many people who have been laid off from Microsoft, just actively trying to sabotage Microsoft's launch announcements by spouting off a bunch of rumors. Or it could be a extremely ambitious or desperate mainstream video game journalist, or even a non-mainstream video game quote-unquote news reporter just spouting off nonsense. I guess it's not fair to name anybody. I could name Jeff Grubb, but I have no proof whatsoever Jeff Grubb would be involved at all. I would just be naming somebody at random in that case. So that's unfair to even mention his name. So it was a whole lot of nothing. Meanwhile, around these announcements, and so maybe these were just rumors put out, frankly, from Microsoft and Nintendo directly. That is another baseless accusation you could speculate on. And that's the thing, is people, I guess the biggest problem here is gamers are bored. There's just no games out. Palworld, I imagine, may have dried up a little bit. I'll give this one more try. Then I think I want to go back to Harpy Ladies. But yeah, in general, gamers I think are bored, and they don't have anything better to do than speculate on new announcements, because there's just more new announcements. And if anything, I think this probably shows that the new way to run a video game business may be to always have some kind of announcement, even if it is just to placate the masses. Yeah, that would be very much my guess as to what should happen. The new Sony chairman coming in and just really making very negative proclamations, or coming off very negatively, had hurt Sony's stock, I think, pretty badly for the first time in a long time. But that may very well just be a couple-day dip, and then it'll just go back to where it was. And today we now have rumors from multiple sources. Still, it has to be labeled as a rumor, though, that the Nintendo Switch 2, or I still would be hesitant to say that it really would be called the Nintendo Switch 2. I don't know why so many people keep calling it the Switch 2, when logic dictates that it won't be called the Nintendo Switch 2. Even if it is a Nintendo Switch 2 in everything but name, it will be called something else, almost certainly. Yeah. But yeah, the rumors are that the Nintendo Switch 2, or the next Nintendo console, is not coming out until at least the first quarter of 2025, and so it's going to miss any kind of Christmas period. Which, if that rumor is true, or if Nintendo confirmed that rumor, that's going to hurt a lot of people's sales of games. Anybody trying to put out a game on the Switch 1 there is probably going to have a few less sales around that announcement. This is a much more modern, these suships, Gunkan suships or sushi ships. In this 8-star gives me a quick spell, but it wasn't strong enough to stop that. Although I don't know what would have stopped it. May very well be the case that now that people have played this enough, they have figured out a better system to make the index versus playing with the low index. What does this do? If you control a card on the field zone, the equipped monster gains attack equal to its defense. So we would need a field spell. So this is gonna possibly put a field spell. Unless this guy can just destroy my cards. Probably shouldn't have said yes to that. Don't think I can win here. So let's go through the main news here. GameDeveloper.com has an article that says Starbreeze admits that Payday 3 is massively underperforming. The studio believes it can rehabilitate the struggling title, but has warned that there is no simple fix. It's very believable. I definitely haven't heard people talking about Payday 3. I recall some major controversies around Payday 2 and Payday 3 and the way they seem to want to monetize everything, or the way they seem to want to change things between one of the two. I'm just going to go back to this deck. So yeah, it kind of felt like from the beginning several things had been done that had hurt Payday 3, and inherently I think there's just a bad amount of advertising here, in that what Payday 3 is supposed to really just be, do you like Left 4 Dead 1 and 2? Would you like a Left 4 Dead clone that is about bank robbing? Honestly, I think the bank robbing aspect is probably part of the problem compared to zombies. Yeah, the second I change the loner deck, I get a free victory. That probably has nothing to do with my actions. Probably random. I would imagine maybe the Payday clown masks are part of the problem here, and Payday 3 could have been set in like space, and then you might have more of a sci-fi or a different twist on it. Whereas just robbing a somewhat modern looking bank in a somewhat modern looking world is not that interesting. It's just going to make your game look more and more like a modern first-person shooter or GTA clone, which it isn't that. Bank robbery in particular would have been in its heyday in the times of like Bonnie and Clyde, so having a bank robbing game where you were kind of in the past and you were dressed in the past and you had limited styles of guns, limited amount of damage a gun can do, limited types of hacking and weapons that you would really have to do. There really wouldn't be any technology or hacking at all. I think a twist on that would work. And frankly, you can have the bank robbing multiplayer game set in many different worlds. So if Payday 3 was one scenario is modern time, one scenario is well in the past with Bonnie and Clyde, and one scenario is far in the future, and one scenario is in a fantasy Skyrim world, that would be some variety. But yeah. There is just no hype around Payday 3. And I don't think there really is a fix for it like they say. Or at least a simple fix. The hope is that you could just continuously get the game polished, and then you could continuously grow an audience, which I don't think that would really happen. I think once a game just kind of fails, you probably have to adopt a fail fast method like every other like every other video game company, once a game is outside of its launch window, if it fails, you just kind of ignore it and have to move on. And I think Starbreeze in particular has put way too much effort and money into the development and launching of Payday 3. What are we going to go for? There's still a lot of Harpy Ladies cards here. I have no idea what they do, but this deck definitely does highlight how many assistant characters for a single theme deck you would need, and you can't normally just have every single card synergize around Harpy's Ladies only. And the anime series also kind of highlights how that doesn't quite work either. The 40 cards in the deck that you start with is way more cards than you can talk about and show off. So like the first season of the first anime of the first Yu-Gi-Oh anime really just had one time you would have seen the Harpy Lady character play, one or maybe two times, and in those two times they really would have only highlighted and shown a couple of the cards, 4 or 5 cards at most, not 40. Which that does highlight, I guess. That does, I think, highlight an issue where if you're going to try and make a TV series of any sort to highlight and show off cards from a collectible card game, then that would leave you very little time to write story. Let's see if this works. Or character development or anything like that. You really would have to just spend the entirety of the time. Yeah. Nothing is working here. Yeah, you would have to just spend almost the entirety of the time showing off cards. I don't think there's anything new or interesting here. Past that. Which, I guess there isn't anything I can do here. IGN has an article here, and I guess this highlights that I don't have many articles from IGN, where Koji Kondo has been inducted into the DICE Hall of Fame. Overdue news for Nintendo's most influential creative. Koji Kondo, I think, is Smash Brothers, I guess. He worked in sound, no, not Smash Brothers. He worked for like Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Sunshine, Galaxy, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and Skyward Sword, and much, much more. According to GameDeveloper.com, an ex-ZA/UM writers are, well, I guess multiple of them, allege that the studio has become a, quote, cold and careless company. Writers Argo Tulik and Dara Klinzik allege that ZA/UM has been completely permanently broken by management. I would have to refresh my mind, though, as far as what ZA/UM worked on. Disco Elysium, I guess, was one of them. Yeah. This is a kind of headline, though, that I'd prefer to not see, because it is working on an assumption that's just not reality, that corporations and businesses and jobs in general are supposed to not be cold and careless, or that they ever possibly could not be cold and careless. Like, at the end of the day, they all have to be cold and careless, unless it's some kind of not-for-profit charity where you're inherently paying out staff more money than you're bringing in, and bosses are just having to find extra funding or take money from their own pockets to pay people. Otherwise, there is a situation where any employee is being inherently exploited, which exploitation, on the face of it, is cold and careless. An employee is doing an amount of work that can be sold for $100. That employee will never be paid $100 or more for the amount of work. They will be paid less than that $100 of the amount of their work, because whatever work they are doing has to also cover the salary of the management and the boss and the company itself. And on some levels, you might be able to make the argument that some of the shortfall that isn't going to the employee is going to paying for like facilities and supplies and things like that. But even if you eliminated all of those possibly valid points, there's still money going into the pocket of the boss, who is very often getting paid way too much to do very little. So when you have a employee-employer relationship that is inherently built on exploitation of the employee, you can't have any kind of warm family feelings here. Now, take it a different direction and think about the same scenario. If you were a parent and your kid was running a lemonade stand, you would be a pretty crappy parent to take money off of the top of the lemonade stand to pay yourself just because you're the parent. Like, there is a scenario of how like families normally would react, and how a family is potentially and usually not cold and careless. You might be a parent that if the kid, I guess, was doing a lemonade stand all the time, you might take money back for supplies and teach them about the real cost of doing business. But you wouldn't take a cut for yourself. You wouldn't charge them rent for running a lemonade stand on the edge of your driveway. You definitely wouldn't be trying to exploit them if you were a good parent. I'm sure there probably are some crazy parents out there that would do all of these things, but your average parent wouldn't. There's also certainly, I think, some weirdness around writers complaining, because writers in general, I think, are given a much better treatment than a lot of other people who work in the video game industry. I don't know if I'm gonna win here or not. For the most part, writers are hired to write a story and backgrounds that there's really no reason why they'd be required to come into an office or anything like that. They would just be told, here's what we need, write it, and then get it to us. And very often, these story and writers are hired just in the last few months of the development of a game, so they're not even around for most of the time. So when I see a headline like this, it's like, it feels like GameDeveloper.com is just trying to push a negative narrative headline and an article that just doesn't need to exist. Because if you ask me if any random video game company was a cold and careless company, forget video game company, if you ask me if any company was a cold and careless company, I would say absolutely. Yeah, no duh. Some may be more cold and more careless than others. There definitely is a scale, I'm sure, but no company cares about anybody. And the more a company is invested in making you think that it cares about you, you're definitely getting exploited in some way. At least you're being set up in some way. Moving on, Censored Gaming has a new video they put out, why the Rise of Ronin isn't being released in Korea, which I feel like that had been mentioned by other people and he's just a little bit late to the party in this case. Or he made an actual video here and deleted his previous tweets, which is also a possibility. It did seem kind of weird that he hadn't made a tweet. He hadn't made a video instead of just tweeting. Here we have the big news, I suppose. And this is one of those cases, once again, where the TV I'm looking at is so blown out on the red levels that there is a set shadow of Mario here I can see on my second monitor, or third monitor actually, that there is nothing there. I don't see anything at all on that TV. Now that TV that my second monitor that I'm reading these articles for are also not the article. It's not the monitor I use to play video games on, and it is my oldest monitor, but it is really, really poorly calibrated, probably by me. But the actual story here says sources say that the Nintendo Switch 2 will now launch in 2025. Updated Video Games Chronicle. This is Video Games Chronicle referencing themselves. Sources suggest that Nintendo's next console will arrive later than expected. I would have leaned more into the thought that it would have been out by Christmas. And you know what? These are just rumors, so it still could be out by Christmas. If anything, maybe this is a case where Sony came out with a lot of negative press announcements and that just gave Nintendo an excuse to delay things, or Nintendo was planning on delaying things anyways. It is Gearbox's, I believe, 25th anniversary. So Gearbox Loot, there's a lot of Gearbox things, are doing a giveaway of looks like it's almost 100%, if not 100%, Borderlands stuff. There's a Homeworld book here. I couldn't tell you what that is. I'm not 100% sure that that's not Homeworld instead of Borderlands. But yeah, there's some Homeworld like records and things there. And so I guess if you just wanted loot, there was a contest from like a Capcom survey that I was gonna do about a week or two ago, and you know, I got to the point where you would put in an email and make an account, and I was just like, you know what, this is just not worth my time. Like, it's just not worth the hassle. And the same would be true for, in my opinion, for this loot for me personally, because I just don't want any of this stuff. Yeah. I have some figures, some anime figures I had back when I was a super fan in anime and collecting it. And they're on the shelf next to the anime DVDs that make them look interesting. And I just recently, after having this figure for at least 15 years, I just figured out what anime this character was from, because the figures I bought were actually figures that were just on sale, super cheap. There was a bookstore in my local mall that would sell them at way below what the prices really should have been for them, and they're pretty decent figures for what they are, where there's really cheap figures that even the really cheap figures, once imported and you're paying that imported tax, particularly 15 years ago, would have been selling for like $20. The figures I have honestly should have been closer to $60 to $80 15 years ago for them, and I was getting them like priced at like $10-20. But yeah, I have this one character that's an anime girl that looks interesting, and it has the Japanese title on it, but I never investigated it. Plus 15 years ago you couldn't just point a phone to Japanese writing and have it translate, and I just found out that she's a character from Gunbuster, which is not an anime I know anything about or ever watched, which doesn't matter. There's still, frankly, 3 other anime figures I still don't know what they're from. I could just point a picture to them, point a camera towards them. But as far as I'm concerned, they're just kind of fancy bookends and decorations. And I think it's perfectly fair to just decorate in that light, in that way. That being said, having a Mad Moxie figure, or which the anatomical proportions here are a little off, with the head being too big, and I don't really like that. Same is true for the Psycho. The proportions look alright. He's just not really a character I'd want on the shelf, nor do I want to have a video game shelf. Because I've long since just gone completely digital, and by going completely digital, I don't have any real games in cases on the shelf. And the new generation of kids, I imagine, don't really want shelves full of video game cases, which are just going to be super thin clamshell CD cases. I did see a picture of somebody's collection of VHSs, and man, yeah, a DVD box set. Imagine if you had a DVD box set that was an inch taller and twice as thick, and that would be your VHS collection, on top of which a DVD, if you're trying to have like the entire just Dragon Ball series, not Dragon Ball Z, I imagine you're getting like 3 episodes per VHS tape, whereas a DVD would squeeze in 6 episodes at a high quality, or at least 4 episodes at a high quality, and could almost certainly squeeze in more episodes, like 6 to 12, even if you go really low in quality and have double-sided DVDs and all that. I definitely have seen like manga collections. It's every issue of the Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball series, and it's going across 2 or 3 shelves. So you're talking 10 feet plus of just manga, and the VHS collections would probably go across the width of 3 or 4 shelves. And that is just way too much. Of course, now that everything is digital, I don't know if people really need shelves. I've always been surprised, even when I was very young, how minimalistic a lot of other people's houses are. Even people that are trying to decorate it, they'll have shelves with like one toy they got when they were 6 years old, and it's still adorning the shelf. Whereas, I guess I was in an extremely lucky position where I could get a lot more toys and thus have a Nintendo collection. Wasn't super easy to do that, however. It was a lot of pleading, and stealing, but I managed to pull it off. Very often I did. A lot of times I was told no. But in this new modern world, and this really doesn't have too much to do with video games, but I'll continue my thoughts since I'm having it anyway, so I might as well just speak it out loud instead of sitting here in silence. In this modern world, though, there is just a lot less consumerism, where that was definitely preached when I was a kid, very much. And the baby boomer generation, and like maybe the generation after the baby boomer generation, not that I'm a baby boomer, but like the generation that my parents would have been baby boomers, so but they definitely were raised on the idea of consumerism and raised in that hedonistic consumerism lifestyle that was very prominent. We're now going in somewhat a less in that direction. There's still a lot of stuff that's consumed in general, and there's a lot of stuff more now that you're just expected to have. Like, you can't realistically even have a job these days without having a cell phone and being able to be in contact 24/7. So people walking around with cell phones, smartphones, is an extra bit of consumerism. But computer ownership was suggested that everybody needed a computer. Nowadays you kind of don't if you're just a light smartphone user instead. Back in the day, having a TV in every room, having giant TVs were kind of a big deal, and people all strived for that. Whereas nowadays you could, once again, just use your smartphone and not have a TV in your house at all. On top of that, just like buying books, buying CDs, buying records, most forms of entertainment have just gone digital, or they have just gone away completely. Some people are in their clothes, but a lot of people certainly aren't. I guess I'm in a kind of good position here. This ends the 25th, and honestly, if I got to this point here, I could stop. If I went this far and got the gems, I could stop. And definitely I would stop at this point. I just don't care enough to own a title. Gems make sense. Legacy packs, not so much. And by stopping, I could then come back and just work on ranked for a week and see if I can get from Platinum 5 to Diamond 5, which would be really nice before I would need to come back after that week's time and play the new festival that is going to unlock. I still need 14 games though in the festival to get 80 gems, which I guess it would be fine if I missed that. And as far as all of these daily quests, we've done that. Daily logins, we've done that. Today is the 16th and I've logged in 14 days, which, yeah, that means I've only missed 2 days this month so far. And then the dual pass still does not matter at all. Right. And it's been exactly an hour, so I'm not interested in really playing any further, so let's just go through the big news. Perhaps this isn't big news, and definitely I need to get better about deciding what is big news, but Alan Wake 2 has written up 1.3 million copies sold. Written up not meaning like a write-off in accounting or anything like that, they're just being silly to say that 1.3 million copies have sold. One of the things that was said in the Microsoft 20-minute little, I wouldn't even call it a press conference because there wasn't a press there, it was more of a presentation, was they talked a little bit to the scale of what the player base is and the number of players are, calling it hundreds of millions of gamers, which nobody really knows that number as far as how many gamers are actually gamers that you would consider a gamer. That is to say, how many gamers are gamers that actually play either on PC and console, of at least one video game on PC and console, excluding people that would also can technically be gamers but only play games on their cell phone, or only play games even on board games and non-video games, which, depending on how you use the phrase gamers, those would be gamers also. I know very old people who play dominoes and cards. They technically are gamers, but that's not what you mean when you're on a video game YouTube channel talking about video game gamers. But if the player base really is just hundreds of millions, we know there's roughly 7 billion people on the planet, and that would certainly show where the scale is, that only 1/70th, or at best maybe 1/10 of all the population of the world plays video games, which I would have thought the numbers might be a little bit higher than that, but it's not super surprising because you can eliminate probably half of the 7 billion people just due to circumstances. People in countries that don't have electricity so they couldn't play video games, people that are way too old or way too young to play video games, people that are in parts of the world where video games are for the most part banned. And Microsoft talking in the realm of hundreds of millions also is really going to be Microsoft's perspective of that, where there's possibly another 100 million or 200 million of just Japanese gamers who would never buy a Microsoft product because the Xbox just doesn't sell in Japan. But yeah, we are definitely not to the point where all 7 billion people on the planet are technically video game gamers, but also that's not likely to ever happen, so that there is very possibly a saturation point that we have reached as far as gamers. There will be new kids born and grow into gaming, but that would also replace just old people who would be dying from or retiring from playing video games. But yeah, there's definitely, like, I think a saturation point as far as the total number of people you can sell video games to, and they're definitely thinking about that, both Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo and every other game developer. They're thinking about that and saying, well, these games are increasingly getting expensive, and unfortunately, unless somebody like Microsoft or Nintendo or Sony straight up said, we're going to put some limitations on the budgets of games, or we're not going to make better hardware, so there's no need for you to make prettier looking games, more expensive games. There is always just going to be this competitive edge that people are going to try to spend more money on games. The only thing that might curtail that even a little bit is that we might have companies like Embracer spend more and more money on games and fail and lose more and more money on those big things, those big budget projects that they decide internally to lower the budgets on games, or they just go out of business, and then these spry new startup companies have to do everything a little bit more efficiently, more cheaply. There is an audience participation in that too, in that consumers of video games, gamers, probably aren't appreciating the fact that video games are taking an extra $1 million to make here and there. That they're not seeing that appreciation. We still very much are in the exact same situation we were in, I imagine, 10 years ago even, where the vast majority of gamers don't make it to the credits. That there's just massive amounts of content that is not being seen. Starfield is a great example of a game trying to sell itself on procedurally generated content, so it could be a game that you could just play forever, and nobody is biting on that. Nobody cares about Starfield's procedural generation at all. So yeah, smaller, cheaper games are definitely the way they need to go, but it is also a very difficult decision to do that for the game industry to wake up to that. So instead, the game industry, since they can't increase the number of people that they're selling games to, and they can't, or won't at least, reduce the amount of money they spend to make a game, then they're taking the third option of trying to raise the price on games and just make more revenue per user, which that too is not something that your average gamer is going to take lightly. The delay of the Switch 2, if this rumor is true, may very well be in part a delay to try and raise the price when the Switch next Nintendo console comes out. That all games from the next Nintendo console almost certainly will be more expensive than Switch games are, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo very much leans into the idea of that being a differentiator, that if you're buying a Switch 2 game, you're getting a better product, theoretically, and thus you're paying a higher price. Minecraft on Twitter has this name and up-and-coming creator who you love to watch, which is getting 465 comments here, and I wonder, that's not what I wanted to do, I wonder if this isn't some kind of market research where they are where they're going to try and do some promotion for Minecraft. But yeah, I'm trying to look here and see if there's any like consistency on who's being promoted, or if I recognize any of these Twitter handles. Like, I think that's kind of the problem here, is that I wouldn't recognize any of the Twitter handles anyways. It wouldn't be a terrible thought, generally speaking, though, if Minecraft's Twitter account hired some character. Probably don't want to bring in Captain Sparkles. He's probably a little too big and a little too old and a little too burnt out already to bring in. But yeah, find somebody who's kind of an up-and-comer and have them be the official person to hype up Minecraft in part. Probably not in whole. Probably just want several different people you could affiliate with. You could certainly get back into the crazy rumor mill here and wonder if some kind of major update or Minecraft 2 was going to be announced. I don't know what you could do to Minecraft though to justify releasing a Minecraft 2. Like, you've already got a game that can have many different things in it and multiple players in it, so there really isn't a major limitation there unless you were going to go full MMO, which that would be, I guess, what Minecraft 2 should be. Just a full single connected world MMO where you would just have players and griefers. Maybe you have a few worlds where there's griefing allowed and not griefing allowed. But yeah, an entire connected MMO experience while playing Minecraft might work. A metaverse type thought around Minecraft might be something somebody would suggest. I don't think that would really work. Yeah, I don't know what new features you would have to add. That would be my first thought, though, is if you were going to try and call something Minecraft 2, you first of all would have to reassure people that you're not abandoning support for Minecraft 1, that Minecraft 2 would be just this MMO different thing that would have a monthly subscription attached to it, which might be way too high even at a few dollars. If you're paying $5 for it, even now, that might be a little too high for most kids. Even a penny might be too high for most kids. And Minecraft very much is for kids. You could drastically try and de-blockify the game, but it wouldn't feel like Minecraft if that was the case. Then you're just making a Fortnite clone of some sort, which is almost certainly what Microsoft would like Minecraft to be. But I am certainly speculating quite a bit just based on a tweet, which could mean nothing. This could very well have just been an attempt to get engagement up for the Minecraft Twitter account. Apparently Post Malone is the executive soundtrack producer for WWE 2K24. Every time I see this guy, he's just got like his face tattoos really just scream insanity and nonsense, and I don't know if he's really as crazy as the tattoos are. It may very well have been the case that he was crazy when he got to tattoos, but he's kind of slowed down in his older age, and you definitely see the full bushy beard and mustache on Post Malone. I think this image here is flipped too, like not the text, but I think the whole tattoo is backwards on his face for some reason, which that'd be weird for an official image. But yeah, it might actually be because of the tattoos that the image might be flipped, but that still wouldn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, you can't really do this, and this is a great example of why you should not get face tattoos or generally mutilate your face too much. Even big loop earrings are going to have you stand out in the crowd in situations where you maybe don't want to stand out in the crowd. But yeah, all this hair and bushiness and beard and mustache undoubtedly are to hide some of these tattoos. Of course, I could be wrong about that. He may be still super proud of the tattoos. Weird connection, certainly, to have Post Malone mentioned around wrestling, but probably not that crazy of a connection. Rap and rock and popular music genres, I think, are definitely very integrated into WWE wrestling if they can succeed at that. That was one thing I guess I spent extra time doing, is I was watching, I think it's Jennifer Lopez. She has this Amazon Prime, This Is Me Now is what it's called. It's a 60-minute music video, basically a collection of music videos. I think semi-biography, talking about the fact that she'd been married 3 times and her struggles in finding love. I watched that. And Post Malone, she has some delusions, and a lot of the music videos are based on like these thoughts and these dreams slash delusions. And one of them is that there's this council of zodiac signs, and in the council of zodiac signs, like Post Malone represents Leo as the zodiac sign, and then several other celebrities represent the other zodiac signs, and they really don't do anything for the movie, and they don't sing in any of it, so they are just there for a cameo reason. And it is a kind of weird cameo. The main problem I would say with it is, and it's gonna highly depend on how much you like J-Lo's music, which I've almost certainly never even heard another of J-Lo's songs until watching the movie, which that highlights how much I watch Amazon Prime more than watch music or anything else. But her music videos seem to be just kind of awkward nonsense choreographed. It looks like dancing. Yeah, it looks like the choreographed dancing is probably pretty good with a lot of backup dancers, but I don't think it really feels like the dancing is telling a visual tale that would be in line with the words being sung, and I just don't think the words singing was particularly good at all. But again, I don't listen to J-Lo, so this may be the best J-Lo that's ever singing that's ever happened. Jennifer Lopez, whatever, J-Lo. But you would think maybe Post Malone would have sung at least a little bit in being in the movie, and he didn't. I don't know what he sounds like when he sings either, if he even does sing. There is something I think slightly offensive in it, in her choreographed dancing, in that it does just kind of put into bad light what a good choreographed musical number should look like, where movements should kind of be on the beat, and that they should be coordinated in a weird way, that in a way that makes sense for what the theme of the song is. Like the very first music video in This Is Me Now has a bunch of women working in a factory that is growing like rose petals, and then the rose petals are thrown into a furnace, and that I guess powers this big mechanical heart that's like a steampunk heart hanging over it. And it thematically just doesn't really connect that much. It's supposed to be like she has a broken heart, I assume is supposed to be the thought there, but J-Lo is inside the factory with the heart, when the heart is also supposed to represent J-Lo, and the music video gets to that point by her having a like motorcycle accident, which that doesn't really connect in any way. But then the dancing that I want to talk about for no real reason here, it has the backup girls and J-Lo kind of just acting like marionette puppets, just janky movement. It's like, I'm gonna hit a beat on the song, so everybody have a janky movement, so your arm is to the left, and then I'm gonna hit another beat on the song and have a janky movement, so your arm is to the right. Yeah, And it just doesn't really make sense. Where you'd think if they were factory workers working a factory line, they would have like hammers, and then they would be hammering up and down to the beat, at least to start with, and then maybe they would spin out of their sitting or standing position on a factory conveyor belt and then move into another movement. But yeah, I definitely am talking way too much about something that really doesn't matter, and I shouldn't have even wasted my time looking at. Moving on, from continuing the big news, Gearbox 25th anniversary, their Gearbox official is retweeting the Gearbox loot giveaway. They also have put together a special playlist on Spotify, 25 years of music, and they are also highlighting that Gearbox's first developed project was Half-Life Opposing Force, which was, I think, basically like a expansion DLC, what you would call DLC before it was actually downloadable, and would have called an expansion to Half-Life. I think, if I was to guess, it's probably a multiplayer thing. Yeah, a major expansion for the iconic first-person shooter Half-Life, which maybe this shows you just kind of like the history of how impactful a game like Half-Life would have been back in the day, enough that a company like Gearbox could continue to succeed somewhat from that, and then eventually pivot to making Borderlands, which was pretty successful enough to make a Borderlands 2, which was pretty successful to make more Borderlands games, although it did inherently, even from this first software developed project, highlight that they were going to very much be pigeonholed into making first-person shooter games, and they've never gotten away from that and really made any side game that has succeeded. It is also part of the myth of video game companies that the Gearbox that exists now is made up of the same people that would have been the Gearbox that would have made Opposing Force, or even that if it was the same people, that they would be in the same mentality and that have the same ability or better ability. And it's also, I think, part of the myth of corporations to ignore the fact that I believe a lot of the people that would have been working on this game would have been people who had been at the Duke Nukem company before that went out of business. I wanted to say that was like Arcane Studios, but I don't think that was the name of it, because there is an Arcane Studios that exists now. So yeah, some of the people at Gearbox definitely had worked on other projects, which that really highlights the need for an IMDb as far as game developers. That somebody desperately needs to make a website like that, where it's just follow the people who worked at games to get a real understanding of who really made what, instead of following the company that claims to have made a game, despite the fact that the company is not a human being and not an entity that can actually do any work at all. I didn't see anything more as far as Valentine's Day stuff and video games, which is not super surprising that they wouldn't try and push Valentine's Day past Valentine's Day. And almost certainly we'll see nothing from Easter. Yeah, this year more than any previous year, I imagine we won't see anything Easter related from video games. Let's see. Here's one of the things that would have been on the podcast. I think there was a video form of the announcement, and then there was a podcast form of it, and I think there was a little bit more said during the podcast. That being said, I don't think it was that much. They really didn't announce anything or say anything. They didn't even really have a bone to throw to people, which perhaps is a good way to set expectations that if rumors get out of control, this is probably the way for a company to handle it, to just make a boring presentation that doesn't make any real announcements or say anything different than what they would have said the week before. But the president, Sarah Bond, says that exciting stuff is coming out in hardware and it will be revealed this year. And generally, Xbox is claiming that its next console will be the largest technological leap you will have ever seen, which I think by the numbers, whatever numbers you manipulate, that's almost certainly going to be the case. But if I was going to think about what the Xbox Series X is now, here's the video of the Xbox official podcast. They didn't do anything crazy like bring back Larry Herb or anything like that. But yeah, thinking about what the Xbox Series X is right now, what could I do in my mind to make the largest technological leap that I've ever seen? Well, my first thought would go to quantum computers. If you could get a quantum computer to work on a shelf and not use hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of electricity and millions of dollars of cooling, that would be a huge technological leap, but that's not realistic at all. So let's throw quantum computing out the window. So then that means probably you'll just see a more than doubling of either CPU and or GPU and or RAM. That would be the three things that you could say were very large technological leaps. Other than that, like a NVMe SSD connection speed, you're not going to have a huge leap there unless you have created some brand new secret storage device technology. You could probably bump up the UHD Blu-ray disc format if you cared about it, and it would be interesting, I guess, if Microsoft announced some kind of HD DVD new standard that isn't just paying money to a Blu-ray consortium for the Blu-ray logo, which Sony in part is a major player in the Blu-ray consortium, which is why Xbox wanted to go HD DVD in the first place. But yeah, if you had a huge increase in disk space, that could be the largest technological leap. If it went from whatever, like 2K resolution, that as far as video output, if it could now go to 4K or even 8K, that'd be a pretty big leap. But that would be difficult to reach. If it majorly embraced surround sound, any improvement in surround sound would be the largest technological leap as far as sound effects go. If it had an Alexa-like device on top of it that you could talk to and interact with, that would be a new feature. I don't know how you could call that a largest technological leap. I'm surprised there isn't an Alexa-like device built into it. There is perhaps a thought that the next Xbox will have to be built pretty robustly if they're going to try to support any kind of VR or AR. even if they just want the possibility to support VR or AR. But yeah, that's about as much as I could see them doing, unless their next device is going to try and go in the opposite direction and just be way more efficient in its power usage, or just smaller, have a battery in it for some reason. I don't think it really needs a battery unless it's going to be a portable device. The biggest speculative thing you could say here is that the next console they're going to launch is going to be something like a Steam Deck competitor, which would be the largest technological leap you would have ever seen from Microsoft, in the sense that they've never had a portable device. So just going portable might be considered a large technological leap. But Microsoft, if they were to come out with a Steam Deck competitor, is in a very weird position there. Unless it is a Steam Deck-like device that is running actual Windows 11 and can run actual Windows 11 programs without any extra caveats or problems, it is just not going to be capable of competing. And inherently, if it's not actually running Windows 11, then it's just going to have a lockdown version of Windows like the Xbox hardware has now, and it's just going to be able to play lockdown, I assume digitally only downloaded games that would have to be sold at $60-$70 for the digital download games. And the Microsoft Steam Deck, if it's going to really compete, it's going to probably start at somewhere around $650 and go well up into the 7s, 8s, even $900. It might very well, if they were going to make a Steam Deck competitor, be $1,000 option there, or over $1,000, just to have it be powerful enough that, unless it's just going to stream video directly from an Xbox, and it's going to be a handheld that literally can only be played in the home, in a home that already has an Xbox Series S or Series X. It would be a good idea for Microsoft if they were just going to try and boil the frog, as it were, and force everybody to go digital, to come out with a Steam Deck like device that is digital only, because I think more people would overlook that, or just kind of not realize that's what they're doing. It's not realistic to have a disk drive in a Steam Deck type device, but it is fairly realistic that you could still sell games on like micro SD cards and plug them in like a cartridge. We don't need a new format for cartridges, probably. I did hear one person talking about the Xbox press conference, and they threw out the most ideal announcement that everybody kind of would like, is to have Nintendo go in and be a partner with Xbox for a portable type device that would have like Nintendo branding, but it would be the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro effectively, and Microsoft would handle the hardware development, and Nintendo would then license all of their games onto that hardware, which I think that could work, but probably will just never happen, because Nintendo of Japan would want to be in total control of that, and Microsoft of the United States just doesn't do business that way, and Nintendo of Japan doesn't do business that way. So there's just inherent cultural differences that would have to be overcome. Inherently, if Microsoft wanted to sell Xboxes in Japan, I think all they really would have to do is just pay Nintendo whatever it took to allow it to be licensed as a Nintendo Xbox in Japan at least. But Nintendo would probably want more than just money. They'd probably want to change some things and have a lot of control. Moving on, we need to go through this news fairly quickly. My attempt at making clips didn't work the last time again. I think I figured out what was wrong this time, but I thought I figured out last time too. Is the macro effectively was paused. There's a let's see, this was from July 10th, 2023. That's not what I wanted to talk about. The Entertainment Software Association, the lobbyist group in the United States for video games, said they had a briefing about the one-way AI is being used in video games. Insights from Riot Games, Nasha Julik, and Module AI's Mike Papas highlighted our industry's commitment to player safety. So, a bunch of stuffy people got together and had a meeting, probably for the state representatives Jay Obonet's benefit more than anything else. This might speak to the level of diversity in the high end video games, and that we have what, in fairness, we are just seeing the back of the heads of people here, but I would say this is mostly white people. I am seeing some women styles of haircuts, but they definitely come off as probably white women. You're definitely not seeing any big afros or curly hair. There's a black hair here, so this might be an Asian, if you're just going to assume that by black hair, which that's too big of an assumption here. The people we can see the faces, we've got two white guys that look like they dressed as twins in a gray suit, white shirt, and red tie. And then, yeah. Can you see anybody new there? I can't see anybody new there. And I would say these kinds of internal meetings where people with power get together and talk generally have the feel that they are not speaking the same language or not really caring about what would have been said by your average citizen and video game consumer. Notice that was not a public town hall or public meeting. It's a little surprising that they even bothered to take pictures, really, instead of just writing an article. ESA is still pretty bad about not tweeting very often, and I'm not 100% sure what they should tweet, if anything. It is interesting to think about where the ESA is going to go now that E3 is completely dead, and so their major revenue source is going to start shrinking quite a bit. All they're going to get money from now is ESRB ratings, and I think the number of people with ESRB ratings or needing ESRB ratings might go down quite a bit. There may be a point where Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo all just get together and say we don't really need the ESRB, but they probably wouldn't say that, because the ESA is the lobbying group that you kind of need to be the middleman, and I don't think Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo and every other smaller developer and publisher want to try to individually lobby / influence politicians. And depending on who's in charge, next time there is any kind of major violence, there is going to potentially be a knee-jerk reaction to try and blame video games again. So the ESA has to exist just as a counterpoint to the National Rifle Association in the United States, because the NRA has a playbook, little playbooks, that they have given to politicians and their supporters and to use to blame gun violence on video games. So the ESA really can't go away. But I really do question where it's going to get its money and what it's going to do to maintain its relevance with E3 gone. Let's see, Crystal Dynamics has an article as far as Black History Month. Now, notably, also Crystal Dynamics put out a picture of what the new Lara Croft is going to look like, which is very much a modern take on what the old Lara Croft looked like in the blue tank top and the shorts and the two guns. While just the day before putting out that image, and almost certainly they put out the image to try and change the narrative, they put out a very poorly received, it seemed, title card that was in Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3's remasters, denouncing Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 for effectively being racist, when all it seems that's offensive potentially in Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 is that there are some native South African tribal characters that are being depicted pretty accurately to the way the tribe seems to dress, at least when they're in a showy kind of mood. There was not really that much different as far as I could tell. Some of the characters had bones in their nose. I didn't see anybody with bones in their nose from the tribe images I was seeing. And one of the characters has like forehead ridges that maybe indicate something, like a lower intelligence slooping forehead, that I didn't see any of the real pictures of people from that South African tribe like that. But it definitely didn't seem anywhere as offensive for how strongly worded the denouncement was in the game. And yeah, we probably are getting to a point where it's ridiculous to so strongly denounce old things when they effectively denounce themselves if they actually were inappropriate, or people just aren't going to care. So weirdly, this article, now that I'm looking at it, has like no pictures in it at all, and is really just a small listicle, in that there are some websites that they're linking to, but they're not even really committing any amount of numbers that Crystal Dynamics themselves are donating to these organizations. This really does feel kind of slapdash without any pictures. And I would assume you'd have to go to like charitynavigator.com, I think is the website, to see how good any of these charities would be. And then they're promoting some games that, particularly these games, could have had a picture on it. I did try to play this Oron Legacy of the Cory Odan, and I just couldn't get into the gameplay style, which was a shame. If I recall correctly, I also feel like Oron Legacy of the Cory Odan was, you're playing as an African like king character in an African tribe, but it's kind of just like a made-up African tribe. So instead of being based off of any real history or any individual tribe in Africa, of which I assume there's many tribes, it kind of feels like a Black Panther experience, where you have Black Panther in a made-up African country, Wakanda, and yeah. So it felt a little weird that you had something that felt like it was trying to celebrate the culture and history of African tribes without actually celebrating the actual culture and history of African tribes. I think you have a higher bar you have to reach. But also, I only got so far in the game, and then it stopped because the gameplay was rough. It was definitely a different experience, though, to be in deep Africa, be in African animal hide dress, and just communicate and talk to Africans only, exclusively. Whereas you compare that to Resident Evil 5, I believe it was, where you have Sheva as an African character, but you're really not playing as Sheva, you're playing as the white guy, Chris Redfield, in Africa, and then almost all the other characters don't really present as African if they're bad guys, or they are zombie Africans that you're just shooting. So there's really no interaction or conversations that happens with any Africans in Resident Evil 6, which is taking place in Africa, which is weird. And definitely if you're playing like The Witcher 3, there's not any black characters, and it is very much underrepresented for what would be the accurate percentage for people in the United States, but in the Witcher universe, and knowing who wrote the Witcher books and what company made them, it kind of makes sense too that there wouldn't be any black characters. Moving on. But it does certainly highlight some silliness of we're celebrating Black History Month if it's specifically about history, and they're celebrating that by giving you a listicle of video game related charities and video games that don't celebrate the actual history of people or the black experience of people, really. Larry Herb noticeably really didn't say anything, and he didn't show up at the presentation. He just goes, "Here you go," and that's pretty much it. Let's see, the Xbox podcast was trending, and yeah, he's probably not coming back, which would be weird to come back. One of the announcements that was made was that Diablo 4 is going to come to Xbox Game Pass on March 28th. I think it was Jeff Gerstmann talking about Diablo 4 and saying, yeah, it's fun to play once through and that's it, but all of the games as a service rebooted seasons concept of Diablo 4 really makes it impossible to want to play it multiple times, even though that's what they're exactly trying to encourage you to do. If it was a Game Pass game, maybe that allows them to shift focus and adjust the game, maybe have a single player mode that doesn't have timers and resets and seasons. That would be the one thing that would get me to play Diablo 4, but they kind of need to fix Diablo 3 too. I think you probably could play Diablo 3 on PC right now without having to do anything with the marketplace and just go through all the story once. But Diablo 4 in particular is really built around the idea of the seasons resetting and then you having a different random loot drops and different equipment build outs and potentially even different character classes. Even Diablo 1 and 2 really wanted you to play the games multiple times with multiple characters, and that's just not realistic in modern times. It also highlights when you make a game that have like 5 different character classes, that means most players are at most going to only play one character class. Even if they play the game multiple times, they probably still wouldn't want to change character classes. There is nobody I know of on YouTube that just plays Diablo 2 and just does a run in Diablo 2 as one character and then starts over a new fresh save game and plays it as a different character. Yeah, nobody made that their lifestyle or their specialist game that they just wanted to play over and over again. Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of an example of that too, or Mass Effect even. Like, very few people want to play games multiple times, even a second time, even if there is a pretty obvious good and bad path in most decisions. But yeah, bringing Diablo 4 to Game Pass is really effectively, I think, just them bringing the latest release game from Activision Blizzard to Game Pass. It does perhaps show some care that they will continue to make Diablo games and not just abandon Activision, or abandon Blizzard in particular, and only focus on Activision and Call of Duty. But it doesn't really signal any major support at all. It also brings up the specter of, is it possibly better to play Diablo 4 on an Xbox Series X if you plug in a mouse and keyboard into an Xbox Series X? Or will this be a game that doesn't actually support mouse and keyboard input? I bet it does support it when it comes out on Game Pass. Diablo in particular is very much a mouse-based game, Diablo 1 and 2. I would feel very awkward using the controller, but I would definitely give it a try because it is also a game that would use a lot of time up. So the more I'm going to play in a game, the more I want to be more relaxed and play with a controller, and not a mouse, which massive amounts of clicking will hurt my hands and fingers eventually. Moving on, yeah, Microsoft confirms multi-platform push for 4 first-party games. This is from GameDeveloper.com. Microsoft bringing 4 games to rival platforms. Diablo 4 is coming to Xbox Game Pass on March, and the future Xbox hardware was teased, but nothing was really said there. Even if a new Xbox did have a massive amount of storage space in it, in the form of just a next generation of Blu-ray discs, that would just be something that is inevitable, something that we kind of need. It probably wouldn't change too much, and they probably wouldn't be burnable discs. What could be, and that I guess if I was going to pick one technology that is real, is right now Xbox Series X don't have a hard drive in it, a traditional hard drive. They instead have what is effectively an NVMe drive in their internal storage, or a chip in their internal storage. Those 3D NAND SSD type chips have recently, in the past 10 years, had a boost in performance, and so it's not likely that it'll get a major boost in a while, although it could. There is a more traditional hard drive technology where they heat up the actual cells of the spinning disk hard drive, and by heating it up with a laser, the magnetic information, the data, can be put at a significantly smaller point consistently on the spinning disks, which means then they don't have to put the data next to it in wider patterns. So you could squeeze a decent amount more data on these laser heated hard drives as a technology. If one of those laser heated hard drives was put in an Xbox Series X, you might have major amounts of storage, but that'd be kind of crazy too. Like 8 terabyte cheap would be more than enough. 4 terabyte cheap would be more than enough for an Xbox Series X. Honestly, even 1 terabyte cheaper would be more than enough for an Xbox Series X, because there's just an assumption there that you're not going to try and download every single game and have them all installed at the same time. And yeah, it almost certainly would be an argument about, can we reduce the price by having a cheaper hard drive that is only slightly bigger in size, versus the idea of we're going to make a major technological breakthrough on the next system by giving you 8 or 16 terabytes of data that, in all honesty, would never get filled up by most people using the hard drive system. If anything, the better thought is that when they say the largest leap in technological terms, it probably is just going to have some kind of AI generated DLSS type functions. So something AI, very possibly just AI image generation for frame rates. That would be the real guess. That's the smart guess. Certainly is that it's going to have like FSR 2 or 3, or it's going to have DLSS 2 or 3, whatever the biggest number is at the time when the next Xbox console comes out. Just AI generated frames as in between frames to have more consistent frame rates and just the appearance of better graphics. Once you go into AI generating the frames, you're not being shown the actual original content from the game engine, and instead of just being shown something that looks good enough. But in all fairness, when you're talking in the terms of playing a video game, all of it is generated anyway, so it's not whether the image is being generated by a video game render engine or whether the image is being generated by a frame interpolation AI image generation. It's still just being generated. Yeah. Moving on. Embracer says it's looking out for shareholders after cutting almost 1,400 jobs. An overruling principle is to always maximize shareholder value in any given situation. There's a quote here. Who is that being quoted from? But yeah, that is definitely the straight up religion that CEOs and management believe in, is that shareholder value is literally and morally the only thing. This is just being quoted, attributed to Embracer themselves as a company. Probably the CEO said it. And it's not really true, too. Even though it's preached in the United States, there's really only a few laws that say you have to look out for shareholders. And I'm pretty sure no politician has ever passed a law saying you have to make the maximum amount of profit for shareholders at the expense of everybody else, every employee and every human being on the planet sometimes who isn't a shareholder, and possibly even the shareholders themselves if you're dumping poison into your products, but shareholder value is going up because nobody knows about it. That still would fall under the idea of shareholder, always maximizing shareholder value in any given situation. That is also a very unnuanced, immature sentiment. If there are no exceptions to a sentiment, then you're not really being very mature, almost always. Yeah, speaking in absolutes. Yeah, only, what is that? Star Wars things. Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. And then that was Yoda, a Jedi, who said it. Was the joke there, I guess. Speaking an absolute statement. Yeah. So I guess this is a game developer article to remind us Embracer sucks. We pretty well know Embracer sucks at this point. There is also, I guess, a point here I want to make really quickly to say maximizing shareholder value could be interpreted, even if there were laws that said you had to maximize shareholder value, you could interpret that in different ways. Perhaps making a company that's stable, that is actually producing games at any rate that could actually be sold for the next quarter, instead of just trying to maximize value in the current quarter and then not really caring about the next quarter. Having stable employees that you don't have to replace or retrain, that kind of stability is probably worth its weight in gold to a company. So you can maximize a shareholder's value by just keeping your company stable, keeping people employed, keeping them working and happy. But yeah, they never look at those possibilities, do they? Moving on. The Disco Elysium Studio ZA/UM, this is from Video Games Chronicle, is reportedly laying off a quarter of its staff and canceling an expansion, which I guess this is probably more context as to the writers saying ZA/UM has become a cold, soulless corporation. It's also said that this is the third project cancelled or suspended in 3 years, which that definitely sounds like bad management at that point. But it's not really any different from any other video game company we've heard about having layoffs lately. Bandai Namco reveals it recently canceled 5 games, saying it plans stricter quality control. Publisher reported a 95% drop in year-on-year profits in its game divisions. In the case of Bandai Namco, I think that probably was the right move, considering how Bandai Namco has made several mobile games, I think, that are pretty bad. And on the face of it, I can't really name a Bandai Namco game that came out in the last few years. I guess maybe this is a Tekken game. But yeah, Dragon Ball mobile games, One Piece mobile games. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's just bad news all around. It seems Video Games Chronicle says that Sony's shares fell the most in 2 years after it said PS5 growth has likely peaked. The company has forecasted a gradual decline in the PS5 unit sales from its next fiscal years onwards. Which, yeah, we talked about this before, is the CEO came out and said some really negative things and the shares fell. Perhaps that was the intention. Maybe they were trying to short their own stock or something. But yeah. Or maybe they're just trying to reset expectations. Now would be kind of a great time to reset expectations, put out some negative news, and have the shares fall, and just establish that not every single quarter, every single year, always going forward, will be profitable or successful. You would think that 2 quarters out of the year should be worse than average, and 2 quarters out of the year every year should be better than average. And yet, if you tried to make that argument, you'd probably lose your CEO job. This is also a point when you see the shareholder stock manipulation, if that's really what's going on here, or just setting of expectations. This is also a point where like a market cap maximum tax might be very helpful for the economies around the world and businesses overall. If a company like Sony is already at the maximum it can earn, if certain industries had different maximums, that would be a lot of government oversight that you probably wouldn't want. But if you just had a flat $100 billion that you could make in a quarter, or maybe even $1 billion per quarter, if that was the maximum amount of gross revenue that you could have before you're just taxed on top of that, well, then all of a sudden you don't have to work as hard to make the maximum amount of money over that $1 billion. You can just take it easy and sell less games in that quarter and shift some games around so they sell in a different quarter. Any kind of limitations, upper limits on capitalism would perhaps help capitalism continue to succeed, as people are going to stick to capitalism whether it succeeds or not. And there'll never really be a situation where capitalism just outright fails miserably until the entire governments outright fail miserably, and even then capitalism just goes back to trading instead of using the government's printed currencies or dollars. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Embracer canceled 29 unannounced games between July and December. Yeah. Which that definitely highlights where you could have maximized the investor value, shareholders' value, by having, even if you take half of these and say they were bad, if you take the remaining, say, let's go with 15 games, and you release those over the quarter, over 2 years, that would be 3 games a month. That's very doable as far as just having consistent sales. That'd be a very nice position to be in, assuming half of the games were bad. Yeah, it's not really rational what Embracer is doing in particular, because Embracer's entire business plan was to just get more investment or sell out completely. And once that fell through the cracks as a possibility, then it just was a case where they are just now overreacting and canceling everything to try and save as much money as possible, which is still not rational, because if that's how they were going to react and overreact, then Embracer should just straight up try to go bankrupt or split up the company. It can't have its cake and eat it too. It can't just really be a company that has 2 or 3 teams that can make video games and that has then laid off dozens of teams and canceled every other project, and they're just sitting on a hoard of intellectual property that they could never possibly do anything with, and they can't really license, because licensing these games would be not what any other game developer would want to do. There really aren't any second-party game development companies out there that are just looking for work alone and want to license a old SpongeBob SquarePants game or something like that and make a remake on that. Bloober Team being about the only exception, wanting to remake Silent Hill 2. There is a lot of passion there. Obviously, there wouldn't be a lot of passion for most Embracer games. What most second-party developers want to do is be paid to develop a game for a publishing company or for a first-party company like Nintendo that would pay the second-party people to develop a game. It's completely backwards that a second-party or even third-party, which I guess in this case that would be potentially about the same. It's completely backwards that somebody would come to Embracer and say, we want to make your game for you, and we want to pay you for the privilege of it. it's just not likely that that would ever happen. Moving on. Yeah, Embracer confirmed that it laid off 1,400 employees and says more cuts could be coming. And then there's an update here that says Blackbird Interactive has confirmed layoffs in a wider realignment program. Yep. Let's see. And then Metro Exodus has hit 10 million copies sold. And then I guess we're still doing the daily rewards, but man, my ad blockers unfortunately do seem to just break a few websites here and there, so I'm not claiming the Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year. They're calling it Lunar New Year sale. Right. So that should bring us to the games that I'm going to make YouTube shorts on. I also need to reboot my computer, so I need to close as many tabs as possible so they don't just end up reloading again. Should I give this one Crimson a chance? I don't think I should. Just be a little bit more critical. And then Thirsty Suitors was coming to Switch, so I was going to give it a chance. Successful Business doesn't look like anything. Slipstream doesn't look like anything. Oops, closed two things there. That odds are that it's pretty low. Here we have a mixed reviewed online MMO type game. Here we have a roguelike deck builder, which I'm going to put this on the fall list, but it's not visually interesting enough to make a short on. This looks like nothing. This looks like nothing. One thing that might be a situation is once I finish doing all the Sudoku puzzles, there may just be a new standard in my mind to pause recordings and take breaks. That's not the direction I want to go. Sudoku puzzles have inherently no real good place where you could break up an episode in between a puzzle. That'd be pretty crazy. But other games, I want to try and push them down to 44-minute long episodes or 22-minute long episodes if it happens to be a rather short game that can accommodate that. That is my goal. I don't know how well I'll actually achieve that goal. There's a possibility I could have like a little bell play in my headphones at the 22-minute mark, but I would probably need to set it several minutes ahead of 22 minutes to try and find a place to wrap up. This Ultros might be something. Like Crab 2. See if that's something. Game about flicking the switch doesn't look interesting enough. I will put this on the fall list just in case there is something surprising here, but almost certainly it's just a low effort asset flip game. I'll give Akuma Wars a chance. Railway Fugitive here. Doesn't feel quite polished enough. It feels like this is just Anime Girls asset flipped. Shooting light rogue game. Players fully combine skills by arranging cards. I'm not seeing any cards here. Yep. And unfortunately, now that I'm talking about taking a break, I think I need to take a break. So let's go ahead and just take a break now instead of me trying to struggle to take a break before we start talking about any of the other news again. I'm gonna pause recording and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I think I'm back. Yep. Should be back. Yep. So, one of the things I was thinking about is I am still playing Memento Mori, Morte, or whatever it's called. I think it's Memento Mori on my cell phone. And it's a gacha game where you take characters, anime waifus, and feed them into the same anime waifus or other anime waifus to power up the characters. So you take characters added into it. But unlike most gacha games, it's really not adding that many characters. It's like you get one new character per month instead of, say, Destiny Child, which was putting out 2 or 3 new characters every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks. It was quite a lot of characters, and most gacha games are like that, where there's usually a decent amount of characters being added, and most of them are just garbage units that you don't care about. Well, when I think about like a Harpies Lady deck in Yu-Gi-Oh!, you kind of still have that same problem where there are 40 cards and Harpies Ladies cards are at best going to be like 3 of them or so. Maybe you can get it up to 10 or 20 cards that are actually the interesting cards in the Harpies Lady deck. So maybe there is room to make a collectible card game that's not so much about collectible cards and is just smaller in scale. I have seen a few card games like that where you kind of have hero cards and you just feed other elements, other cards usually, into the hero card to level them up. Maybe there is something to that idea to take it to an even bigger extreme, where usually the cards would only have like 3 levels of improvement. Maybe there is some kind of recursive level of feeding in cards to improve things. Also, if you made it like a digital card game exclusively and weren't selling actual cards and not trying to sell card packs, it'd be very easy to have just 10 hero cards that are really important, or 40 hero cards that are really important, and then you would just get a ton of duplicates and it would level up your cards and make them more powerful, which would be a weird card game certainly if I had a Blue Eyes White Dragon that was slightly more powerful than my opponent's Blue Eyes White Dragon. But that would be an interesting twist too, particularly if we got into just like 10 attack points differences based on how much you leveled up something. Clearly though, the Magic the Gathering, Pokemon the trading card game, the Yu-Gi-Oh card style, the ones that have been very popular, are probably popular for a good reason. But if you were going to try and compete or do anything new, you almost certainly have to go in a very different direction. You can't just copy Magic the Gathering and convince enough people to do that. That's why Hearthstone kind of did go in a very different direction. Hearthstone is kind of a great example of a collection of cards that are somewhat limited in what you can have there, and somewhat limited into the types of cards you can play, because it had a hero class, and whatever hero class you picked limited you down to a subset of the total cards that would have been playable. Anyways, let's get back to looking at games that came out. I don't see enough polish here for Monster Scout. I don't think there's enough there for that to catch my attention. Yep. This looks like an RPG Maker. I made a mistake of typing in Has-Been Hotel into my personal Facebook account, and Facebook on my personal account is so desperate to find anything to advertise to me, and it's so bad at advertising because of that, and it often puts me in just random lists of nonsense that it thinks I'm interested in. But because I talked about how Has Been Hotel on Amazon Prime you need to change the audio language to just basic English and not dialogue boost English, it immediately started suggesting posts with Has Been Hotel fan art in it. I wouldn't be surprised if there might be slightly some actual true enthusiasm around Has Been Hotel being released now on Amazon Prime Video, but I would heavily suspect it's just algorithm, and that just also highlights how Facebook really sucks. I'm gonna give this a chance. There's really no way around this. Play the role of a blacksmith and handcraft weapons, shields, and armors. I don't think this is a fun enough game, really, to just have the crafting mini game from Skyrim effectively without any of the other elements. But you know what? Maybe somebody will convince me different of that. Tortuga Pirate's Tale. I feel like this game has been out for a while. But maybe it's been in early access. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see kind of a large number of games. This one has already been on the fall list, but whatever. I'll make another short around it. Yeah, my concern about making duplicate YouTube shorts on the same game really goes out the window when it's already a system where 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shorts a day could potentially be released at very consistently. I'll give this a chance. Uncanny Valley Machine. Let's give that. They're probably being too generous there in that case. We have a prologue of a game that looks like nothing. We have an all green Game Boy looking game. Another hardest game. This title scares me away from this, so I'm gonna say no. Dragon Quest Builders. Guess maybe that's coming out of early access. Here we have Winnie the Pooh meme character. Memento Mori. I'm still playing it, but I'm not really engaging with it as much as I was originally, even though I did have 2 accounts. That's because pretty much both accounts have hit a speed bump and can't really go any further. This is one of the things I think Cracking the Cryptics app potentially could have had, where this Island of Insight literally may just be a lot of collections of different kinds of puzzles, 10,000 puzzles, instead of focusing solely on one kind of puzzle. And then it has the background of having an avatar. It looks, frankly, like there's too much work being put into this game to try and make it feel like it's competing with The Witness. And then the multi-platform MMO aspect to it seems really weird also. It feels like it's trying to be Uru, even though Uru didn't work as a concept and nearly bankrupted Cyan trying to make it many years ago. The better comparison, I would say, would be Regency Solitaire is probably what Cracking the Cryptic should be like, where there's a light story in between the puzzles. That there's a lot of cheats that you get when playing Regency Solitaire. There's definitely a nice layout in Regency Solitaire as far as the level of difficulty. But yeah, inherently Cracking the Cryptic wants to be this DLC selling app full of Sudoku puzzles, but is weirdly missing the puzzles from the other Studio Goya games like Classic Solitaire. Classic Sudoku. So it's not even as good. I hope this meme character, this Skidbeady Toilets, I hope this goes away pretty quickly. It's pretty dumb. But then they'll just move on to the next meme. I saw a game today that come out today, so we're not going to look at it, but it's just a Biden-Trump political game from the title alone, I can tell, because it has Biden and Trump in the name. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the story should be around Cracking the Cryptic as you're solving the Sudoku puzzles. You could definitely have DLC that is just telling it different stories. And I don't know if the story, it really needs stories at all, but there probably should be some kind of visual novel cutscene where some kind of conversation happens in between each Sudoku puzzle, so you can take a break and have some kind of conversation happen, some kind of falling action happen in between each Sudoku puzzle, because that's what you desperately need. Like, if it's Cracking the Cryptics, the people on Cracking the Cryptics YouTube channel solving a puzzle, they take like 20-30 minutes to solve some of the puzzles that are in the free sample. For me, it's 100-200 minutes, so 10 times as slow, roughly. And yeah, that's just way too much time. Even 20 minutes is enough time to have some other activity that besides Sudoku, some kind of left brain instead of right brain, or right brain instead of left brain activity. Yeah, and if you are just wanting to do the puzzles, let them turn off the visual novel conversations in between it. But when you don't have anything other than just the puzzles, that's where you get into the territory of a single screen Unity game, which is very much what Cracking the Cryptic looks like, and what I would describe it as is a single screen Unity game where you're just solving puzzles. And I wouldn't really make the same complaints with like Hex Cells, because Hex Cells, let me give this a chance. Hex Cells overall does has fairly small levels. It has a lot of levels, but they're small, so you can take a break more often, and you know what you're in for. So it's worth mentioning, at least I heard this, and maybe this was a joke, that it only took one day for somebody to put out a nude mod for the Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 remastered, which, yeah, not super surprising there. My biggest concern still around this remaster, which is being rated very positively, would just be the tank controls and running around places that, even though they may be remastered graphics, are still levels that were designed almost randomly. See if we've got any negative reviews down here as far as complaints. It's like, love the original Tomb Raider, love the original Lara Croft, love this remaster, hate Crystal Dynamics simple as. Yeah, here's your negative controls are complete garbage. Modern controls are legit broken. So maybe it's the new modern controls that are the problem. Worst camera work ever. But overall positive, so I wouldn't let those negative reviews really dissuade me. Although you do get into a weird position now where you would need to consider, is there going to be a Tomb Raider 4, which Tomb Raider 4 maybe was called Tomb Raider Angel of Death, or maybe not. Is there going to be a remaster of whatever would have been the fourth Lara Croft Tomb Raider game? And or is it playable and still reasonably playable to play Tomb Raider 4 in its current state without it being remastered? Then that also asks the bigger question, is it really even relevant to play any of these old games? Or are they just pushing this out quickly so that they can then once again forget about the original Tomb Raider games in favor of a reboot, the second reboot now, I guess, or maybe even the third reboot. Yeah, that is somewhat questionable whether you really need to play these games at all, or maybe we've hit the point where Tomb Raider games, which was called Lara Croft Tomb Raider, I think originally, Lara Croft in Tomb Raider, as if she would have been a character in other games. Now it's called Tomb Raider 1 through 3 Remastered starring Lara Croft. Lara Croft. There is no actual U in the name, but whatever, everybody in the United States calls her Laura. Moving on. It is increasingly stupid, I would say, though, to actively care about making a nude mod for an old Tomb Raider game. I suppose you're probably just doing that out of nostalgia of what was probably a nude mod originally. I'm not sure there actually was ever an actual nude mod for any of the Tomb Raider games, though, or that may very well have just been a false rumor. Here we have another old school point and click adventure game that definitely catches my eye. Unfortunately, this also is not an actual old game. There just weren't that many games like this. And arguably, I guess it's a case where George Lucas and Lucasfilms, LucasArts did such a good job with the Scum VM games that they sucked all the oxygen out of the room for any competition, and there just wasn't that much competition back then anyways. It was very much a different experience where you could feasibly own all the good games on PC back in the day and discuss all the good games on PC. It wouldn't be that long of a list. Whereas modern times, there's just so many games now, and as we can see here, there is massive amounts of games always being published. Most of them, I would say, are not worth considering or thinking about, but there's even amongst the 80 or 100 games that might come out on Steam every couple days, there's still enough that have at least a chance of being good. If it was a case where me looking at all the games that come out on Steam was just rendering almost 100% garbage, and I really felt that way, I would give it up. It would mean I would stop making shorts, and YouTube shorts are actually working. They're about a third of where people are finding me now, so that's probably a major part of my success is that it is coming from YouTube shorts, and they take no work at all, so I can't really complain about them, can I? They just take up time on my computer, which if I'm just good at scheduling things, that shouldn't be a problem either. It shouldn't be, it often feels like it is, because I am very flippant and random about when I want to start recording, and if I'm ever in the mood to record, I should embrace that mood as much as possible to make as much footage as possible. We'll give this a chance. Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. This looks like too much visual nonsense, so I'm going to say no to it. There's a lot of games here, though. Just a lot of games. That was awful animation. Hand-drawn pencil crown. I just don't think that would ever be a game I would give the time of day to. Plane Mechanics Simulator. Unfortunately, we have a very high negative review here, and it seems like they're putting it out as a final product with not really fixing anything. It's ideal if you want to spend 30 minutes taking apart an engine, but a velocity if it's a quick 3-minute job. The promising game left unfinished may be worth $7 if it's on sale. Don't pay full price. What a joke. Had great potential, but it hasn't been updated for ages. Yeah, so it's just a case of a game being abandoned. I think it is probably also a case that a Plane Mechanics Simulator is going to be something that is either going to be totally made up nonsense, or it's going to be way too in detail from somebody who's just obsessed around that. Either way, negativity is overwhelming it, so that's not going to get a YouTube short or a follow. Let's see. Do I have anything else to really even talk about here? We've hit a point where I've not been before, where I really don't have anything to talk about, and I'm just looking at the games. It hasn't been that big of a news day, particularly when a lot of the news is just more layoffs, which I think we're probably all collectively exhausted around layoff announcements. Seems to be quite a few games here that are showing up that are on my follow list before, which probably means that games got announced like January 1st and then are getting put out February 15th. We're probably approaching the end of quarter one. January, February, and April should all be in quarter one now, so it's still a month and a half of the first quarter if there was some kind of special financial reason to release your game. We might be closer to hitting a point. I'm gonna give this a chance where, you know, we might be getting close to a point where there's I'm gonna say no to this. Actual games, AA games, AAA games are going to be released, and maybe some of these more low effort garbage game makers are trying to get their game out before there's really any competition. But even if that was the case, that like in January every year they would dump garbage games, I'm gonna give this a chance. It's probably nothing. Let's see. An erotic RPG game with a story about magical girls, Elvis, and a bisexual sorceress. Yet, it is not in the adult section. It seems to have a VR mode. It's $40. It says it has English full audio. I question that. Yeah. I'm going to put this on the fall list because I'd like to see what people actually review it as. Overall, the visual polish here doesn't look great. I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it either. Even some of the games that are just really ESRB rated, like aim for mature, don't get YouTube shorts because it pops up a box in my program to click to confirm your age, and since it's automated, it doesn't actually click to confirm the age. Oh man, we really are getting a lot of garbage today, though. Anyways, what I was saying was, if January was the dumping ground for bad games, and that was always the case, then there should have been a lot more games coming out in January. Maybe February is the dumping ground for, I'm gonna say no to this one. Maybe February is the dumping ground for bad games. But you would think then there might be some competition, or at least some good games also being dumped on the false assumption that they're bad. I'm not really seeing any evidence to that part, or that thought. See, this is a free game. This is a student project. I'm gonna not bother to, well, I guess I'll put it on the follow list just to see if there's any user reviews, but as a student project it's already free. Okay, so that gets all of the games done, and then it can bring us here to SteamDB. Palworld still holding its third position, although it's getting closer and closer to falling down to fourth. And I would say I don't think I have anything else to say here. I did hear that Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is actually a sequel to the mobile game Grand Blue Fantasy. So either you watch the Grand Blue Fantasy anime, which you can get outside of Japan, or you would have had to have played Grand Blue Fantasy in a Japanese account on your cell phone. It doesn't seem like Relink does anything helpful to catch you up or tell you what's going on in the world. It is just a sequel with the assumption that everybody playing knows what's going on. Let's see, my chart here, we have Apex Legends spiking up even higher. We have PUBG Battlegrounds going high, and we have Helldivers 2 shooting up, which it seems like Helldivers 2 may be a major player. We'll see. It'll be interesting, and it's very much premature to say Helldivers 2 might be a Game of the Year candidate for 2024, but it may very well be exactly that. Everything else feels like it's pretty much the same. Okay, so let's go through the Video Games Chronicle news stories and the news stories in general. trying to make clips, trying to train myself to be good at making clips. I know I've screwed up the past 2 streams, and that really has left only like 1, maybe 2 streams where I actually have made clips. I also have been checking those clips to see if anybody's seeing them, and nobody seems to be seeing them. That being said, it is undeniable that something happened on my channel that got me a lot more suggestions, a lot better watch time, a lot more views. So either I'm getting really good or something weird else is happening. I have no idea what that would be. And maybe that something weird is the fact that maybe if you just make clips, that tricks the YouTube algorithm. On a more human-to-human thought, though, which is more important, I think clips could be very helpful as far as people searching headlines of video game news and then being directed to my videos. I don't know how much helpful it is after that point, though, because I'm just reading the headlines. Like, the appropriate thing definitely here would be to read the clip and then read the entire story. But if you were going to do that with all video game news, I would have to make that the only thing I did, and that would be a lot of work. Realistically, Video Games Chronicles should be reading their clips headlines, making clips on their videos, and then reading out their entire article. In fact, pretty much any website should probably have either an AI read out their articles, or not even AI, just text-to-speech read out their articles. If you want to do it well, you would have an employee read out the articles. That would help people that don't want to read articles quite a bit. It would help people that can't read articles quite a bit. Blind people, people with dyslexia, people who don't fully understand the written language of English, or whatever language it's written in. Yeah. Anyways, let's stick with the system I'm doing now, but yeah, realistically I should be reading the entire article out. Let's go. FromSoft has acquired the Elden Ring trademark from Bandai Namco. So ownership of the trademark switched between the companies last year. Okay. That probably leaves Bandai Namco in a worse spot as before. I almost certainly could never read through all of this. It would just drive me crazy. It would be too much work. But text-to-speech, maybe? Maybe there is a way to do this with text-to-speech and almost automate the whole thing? Yeah. More and more, the thought on my YouTube channel is to eliminate me from the YouTube channel. Yeah, almost certainly there is a text-to-speech plugin for Firefox where I could just click something and it would just speak the whole article out loud. Then I guess I would just have to sit here in silence for the stream. And then maybe by listening to the entire article it would give me better information or more ideas on how to comment and add something. Those are all thoughts, certainly. Thoughts I'll have to think more about. Post Malone is curating WWE 2K24 soundtrack and will be a DLC character. Sources say the Nintendo Switch 2 will launch in 2025. Capcom suggests it could release more $70 games after Dragon's Dogma 2. Xbox has reportedly considered releasing Flight Simulator and the next Doom on rival consoles. A lot of these headlines are probably going to be talking about the Microsoft rumors when we get deeper into the older articles. But whatever. They were rumors at the time, so as much news as any rumor ever is. Spider-Man 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 were the big winners at the DICE Awards. Insomniac Game took home 6 prizes, while Larian's won 5, including Game of the Year. There you have all the people doing Spider-Man, flipping anime finger gestures. 10 years later, every Smash Bros. Fighter finally has an amiibo. The final character, Sora, was released today. And I believe the guy in charge of Smash Brothers is semi-jokingly hoping that he can retire now. I wouldn't be surprised if this is very possibly the last amiibo ever made, period, for any game. It'd be easy enough for Nintendo to make like one more amiibo, but I bet they would never commit to trying to have amiibos for every character. And notably, the amiibos aren't inherently advertised as only for Smash Brothers, so a Zelda amiibo could be used in the Zelda game. Pretty much all these amiibos can be used in a Zelda game to give you something. Usually it's not much. There are a few places where using this specific amiibo will get you something special. But yeah, this is more than a big enough collection, and I seriously doubt you could convince kids to buy variants of the same characters over and over again, particularly like Rob the Robot here, which most kids aren't going to recognize or care about, or the Wii Fit lady. I don't think she has an actual name. The fact that it's been 10 years since Amiibo was announced also probably highlights 10 years of failure around the Amiibo being a Toys to Life concept, although it's been way more successful and lasted way longer than any of the other Toys to Life elements efforts. Anyways, let's move on. Remedy says it will grow and expand the Alan Wake franchise in the future, which I think that pretty much just means that any game they make, they will try to at least loosely connect to Alan Wake, which is fine, I guess. It does eliminate a possibility that they would make a game that would just be not supernatural in its nature, but that's not that hard to really do. Xbox Game Pass now has 34 million fully paid subscribers. I assume fully paid means they're either on a ultimate plan or they're on some plan that is fully paid up. The fully paid caveat there seems weird. Yeah, but this is another example of how Microsoft's perspective of their reach is limited to just about 34 million people on Game Pass, and there probably are only 200 or 300 people on the planet that really are gamers and play games. And then I guess the part here is that there was a response. They're fully played, so those are not promotional players. Those are people fully paid subs, is what I guess he means by that, is that they're not including people that got one free month when they bought an Xbox. But yeah, if you asked me a couple days ago, would 34 million Game Pass subscribers be a big number, I'd say no. I would have thought it would have been 200 million, if not higher. that probably does highlight, if you could compare the 34 million of fully paid subscribers to the number of Xboxes sold in total, or the number of current Xbox users. I imagine there is probably a pretty big difference that would highlight that Xbox players still a significant amount of them are interested in only buying the games they want to buy and playing the games they buy. Very much, I would suspect that there is a large number of people who buy Xboxes and just play Call of Duty or just play Halo on them. 1, 2, 3 games at most per year. And for those kinds of players that are going to just play one main game per year, having Game Pass or getting Game Pass does not make any sense at all. Let's move on. Diablo 4 is the first Activision Blizzard game coming to Game Pass. Xbox claims its next console will be the largest technical leap you will have ever seen. Alan Wake 2 has sold 1.3 million copies and is Remedy's fastest selling game to date. Xbox confirms it's bringing 4 games to rival platforms. Xbox says its console will remain the flagship experience and the only place for Game Pass. This was an interesting statement, though, because Game Pass is already on Windows. I'm pretty sure, and I'm fairly sure that there is something labeled Game Pass where you could stream a few games on cell phones. But another thing I guess to take from that presentation is they didn't announce Microsoft Gaming as the new title for hardware or for the company. Like, there was some thought that they may drop the Xbox branding, and they still very well may do that with their next console announcement. But right now, it's all Xbox. You're still seeing the Xbox logo everywhere. It's no indication that they're ready to change the name or do anything different. The biggest thing they could do differently is just not have a ridiculous naming scheme next generation. Just find a new name. It's time to stop calling it the Xbox and, I don't know, call it the X Cube if you've got nothing better to say. Yeah. Oh, darn it, that is going to be the title, isn't it? It's going to be a dumb thing where it's X and then exponential 3, and it'll be called the X cubed. Maybe Twitter/X will prevent them from doing that, but oh man, that really would be a dumb thing they would do, isn't it? Anyways, moving on. Phil Spencer wants Sony and Nintendo games on Xbox, but says he doesn't expect it. Yeah. We can all wish, I suppose. A new trailer for EA Sports College Football announces a summer release. The Palworld developer advises fans to play other games while they wait for new content. The subheadline here is, you don't need to feel guilty about hopping from game to game. Which I think that is probably an admission here that while Palworld was very interesting initially, there wasn't enough content there for it to effectively launch. Whether it's launching in early access or not, your first launch is your launch, and it'll be questionable whether you get a big Palworld gets a big bump when it, and if, I suppose, it ever comes out as a final product. Disco Elysium studio ZA/UM is reportedly laying off a quarter of its staff and canceling an expansion. The Epic Game Store is giving away 3 classic Fallout titles next week. These inherently are the 3 Fallout games made by the original creators of Fallout that really bear nothing to Fallout 3 or New Vegas and are just not worth playing if you like the modern Fallout games. And I don't think they are in line with like the Amazon Prime Fallout TV series either. The story might be in line, but the gameplay style and the visuals won't be in line. Bandai Namco reveals it's recently canceled 5 games, saying it plans stricter quality control. Deus Ex actor claims Eidos asked him to stop talking about Adam Jensen. I guess Deus Ex isn't as popular as we think it is. Interesting. Well, very rarely do you have a voice actor being told to not talk about a character or asked not to talk about a character when they could just let him shoot off his mouth and talk about the character. It seems like that would indicate that they're not that interested in saying anything about Deus Ex, or specifically maybe about Adam Jensen. I wouldn't even be surprised if they are actually interested in doing something more with Adam Jensen. They're just going to possibly not use the voice actor, same voice actor. But yeah, generally speaking, if you get a voice actor who voiced a single game, they are usually encouraged heavily to just keep on talking about that character. And then that just keeps the hype going around the Deus Ex series, which I don't know if there really has ever been that much hype since the first Deus Ex game, and the first Deus Ex game is so different from like Human Revolution. So you pretty much would just want to play Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, and maybe a third game if you're going to try and wrap up the story in that way. And then probably a full reboot would be needed after that point. You could possibly do a full reboot even now. There probably is some major room for improvement on how the game actually plays too. If you were to compare feature to feature something like Cyberpunk 2077 and Deus Ex, I would hope that Cyberpunk 2077 has some interesting changes, tweaks, additions that a new Deus Ex could copy. Sony's shares fall the most in 2 years after it says PS5 growth has likely peaked. Embracer canceled 29 unannounced games between July and December. Ahead of its business update, Microsoft reportedly told staff that every screen is an Xbox, which that statement floated like a lead balloon, but yeah, it is obviously part of at least somebody's plan in Microsoft to try to have things labeled as Xbox on more screens, whether it's cell phones, TVs, or PC screens. Sony could release a new Astrobot game this year, it's claimed. Forza Motorsport's latest update adds the Nürburgring Nordschleife track. Embracer confirms it's now laid off 1,400 employees and says more cuts are coming. Square Enix is planning to improve Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's visuals. There was something weird about my macro and the way it ran today. It just was putting tabs out of order quite a bit, and I had to manually go and open all the Gematsu articles. So all my Gematsu articles are now at the very end of the they're at the very end of the . window. All the tabs are at the end of the window. That I should be able to say that. Yep. Which means maybe my middle mouse button is not going to work. So we'll have to see. Yeah, it's not going to work. It's going to try and push me to the right. And because there are tabs to the right, I can't do that. So I'm going to have to manually just open all of these tabs. So that's going to make a mess, but whatever. There's a rumor that Switch's successor is not slated to launch until Q1 2025. Cricket Through the Ages for Switch and PC launches March 1st. It's first launched on Apple Arcade. Let's see. And we'll try and slow here. Yeah, I'm being extremely generous if I was to put this on fall list. But I guess I will be. It probably would be better, in this case, to start on the left side of the tabs then, and see if I can get use of my middle mouse button back to close the tab. Ys 10 Nordics is coming to the West this fall for PS4 and 5, Switch, and PC. Is that really worthy of another YouTube short, though? If it's still not updated with a date, I would say no. Princess Peach Showtime's Transformation Act 2 trailer and screenshots. Outcast: A New Beginning demo is now available. Roguelike deck builder The World According to Girl is coming to Xbox One and Series and Switch on February 15th. So, since I manually opened all these articles, some of these may be particularly old, which may link to things I have already either put on the fall list or wish list. Rhythm platformer Crimson launches March 21st for all consoles and PC. PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic catalog lineup for February 2024 has been announced. Dueled DX for PS4 and 5 is now available. Side-scrolling shoot-'em-up Pop Slinger is coming to the PS4 and 5 and Xbox One and Series on February 29th. These are really blurry screenshots. Probably because it is just a colored marker art style. A physics-based sumo wrestling game called Nyanvi is coming February 22nd for Switch and PC. So this is one that's not been on the fall list. Or maybe I just chose not to put it on the fall list, so that should mean the rest of these articles are probably new. Morbid, The Lords of Ire launches May 23rd. It is a catch-22. If I was going to say don't make YouTube shorts because it doesn't have a release date right now that's been updated on the Steam page, that's a bad way to do it. I should make a new YouTube short if an actual date has been announced, even if the information really hasn't changed. It all just kind of doesn't matter. I really doubt that my YouTube shorts are ever going to be archival style of footage, that people are going to go back and look at it in the past. So they really feel much more like this is just a commercial that is being put in front of your eyes at the moment, and once that commercial's done, it will just go to the next commercial as far as a YouTube short is concerned, and then you'll just forget about it. And then if you saw the same commercial in the same 1 hour period, you probably wouldn't even notice. Whisker Waters launches April 19th. I wish it would work a different way. Definitely, though. I wish it was the case that I could make a YouTube short and it would be really popular, and then people would just be recommended to watch that short over and over again for years and years, but I just don't think it works that way. I think if you're lucky, a YouTube short will stay popular for a few days, and then it's probably not even in the algorithm after that point. Fantasy action adventure game Self-Floss to be published by Merge Games. If it was inherently the case that some shorts could stay around forever, something like the Rickroll as a YouTube short would be way too popular always. Avatar: The Last Airbender competitive multiplayer fighting game has been announced. I could see that working pretty well if it's a good fighting game. That's always the caveat, certainly, around fighting games. Famitsu sales from February 5th to February 11th, 2024 have been updated on Gamatsu. Let's see what's new. Helldivers 2 making the 20th spot for PS5, and that's really the only thing that changes. Hardware sales still seem pretty good. If the PlayStation 5 at this point feels like they're going to see sales decline, then that is probably an admission that the overall sales of 4.5 million PS5s, even if you add in a few more digital editions to get it to 5 million, that's not going to catch up with the OLED model of the Switch, which is at 6.6 million, or the Switch Lites, which would then bump up Switch total sales to 12 million, or the original sales of the Switch, which is another 19 million. So you're talking 31 million units in total compared to maybe 10 million units. And if that's the total hardware sales of those consoles in Japan, it does also speak to the theoretical maximum that any one game could really sell. About 20 million people, I would suspect, could buy a game in Japan. Japan is a small country, certainly, but yeah, if every single person on the planet who could buy a video game bought a single video game, it still would probably just be in the high hundreds of millions numbers. So that gives me some insight on the scale, I guess. Guilt is coming to the Switch on March 14th. No Man's Sky Omega update is now available. So that's expeditions overhaul, new on-planet missions, claimable pirate freighters, and more. Yeah. Between Starfield and No Man's Sky, pick No Man's Sky by a long mile. And there's very little hope that Starfield would ever, even over the course of 5 to 10 years, have enough polish to it that it would be as good or better than what Starfield is right now. Can I even play No Man's Sky? Let's check that on Steam. Yes, I can play No Man's Sky. Have I put it on the wish list? No. Probably at some point just determined it wasn't worth my time, which is still probably true. But man, you look at these screenshots and this looks way more interesting than the screenshots of Starfield. Forever Skies is going to launch as a PS5 console debut exclusive. It's due out alongside the PC version in 2024. Which, yeah, if you have to caveat it as a console debut exclusive, all you're really saying is that the game is being ported from the PC version to the PlayStation. Our game is in early access on PC right now. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen more of that, where people just do early access and testing on PC and use PC gamers as your testers before making a console port. Inevitably, it almost certainly is happening quite a lot, but it's done more in secret. It's not so blatant that you would have an early access, and then as soon as the game was going to come out of early access on PC, it's also coming out on a console, which it seems like that's the case as to what's happening with Forever Skies. Outworld Definitive Edition for Switch launches March 28th. Let's see. Outworld. Looks like a lot of random stuff. Let's continue. Microsoft is bringing 4 games to rival platforms. Diablo 4 coming to Xbox Game Pass on March 28th, and future Xbox hardware has been teased. Action-adventure game Waltz and Jam has been announced for PC. Alan Wake 2 sales top 1.3 million. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot DLC Goku's Next Journey gameplay is available on Gematsu. Withering Rooms launches April 2nd for the PS5 and Xbox Series and PC. There's actually quite a lot of Gematsu articles today and pointing to actual games of perhaps some actual interest. Unicord Overlord details more characters, battle stages, skills, and tactics. White Day 2, The Flower That Tells Lies Complete Edition is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series in 2024. I guess we don't have a Steam link to this game. I think this is on PC, but there's no Steam link here. I do think I want to get into the White Day series. There's a long list of game series I want to play in a short amount of time, certainly, that I seem to have. Rivals 2 adds Clarion and Loxodont. What is Rivals 2? That's the question. I think in this case, just adding a couple of characters for a game that's not out yet without announcing a launch date, I think that probably is taking it a little too far. I don't want to get into a situation where Rivals 2 announces a new character every couple months and then they get another YouTube short. Okay, so we're not at the end of the show quite yet. We still need to go through the GameDeveloper.com articles. But then we'll be done, and my image and banners are messed up. I do question if maybe I should just give up on the banners. I like them, and they help for more of a framing reason than anything else, to not have to crop or stretch or skew the image of the web page I'm looking at. But yeah, I need to spend the extra time at some point to fix the order of how the web tabs open, and then that will fix the order of how the banners activate. Anyways, let's hurry up and finish GameDeveloper.com articles. XZA/UM writers allege the studio has become a cold, careless company. Xbox confirms multi-platform push for 4 first-party games. Alan Wake 2 has written up 1.3 million copies sold. Metro Exodus hits 10 million copies sold. There's a report that ZA/UM will lay off 25% of the staff after recent project cancellation. Bandai Namco posts third quarter slump despite early Tekken 8 success. So I guess they were hoping for success in Tekken 8. Embracer-owned studio Flying Wild Hog has unionized. The union hopes to change the industry for the better. Yeah. Although unionization in a company that's already laying off everybody and very possibly going to just fail miserably may not get you that far, but it's probably the right move. Like, if you're starting to see layoffs in the game industry at all, now would be the time for every game company to be forced into unionization. It also would give the management of video game companies just a perfect excuse to blame higher prices on video games on the union, or to blame sales not being that high to shareholders on the union. Of course, I don't want to see video game companies' management succeed in convincing young, impressionable kids that unions are a bad thing inherently. But unfortunately, a lot of people have that default thought that every union in every situation is a bad thing, or every union in every situation is a good thing, and obviously there's going to be some subtlety there and levels of effectiveness there. Only a Sith speaks in absolutes, to use that quote a second time, do a callback. The Big Index 2024 articles for game music composers at Gamatsu.com. Starbreeze admits Payday 3 is massively underperforming. Embracer says it's looking out for shareholders after cutting almost 1,400 jobs. PlayStation chairman says the company needs more aggressive PC approach. I still haven't actually changed it to include GameDeveloper.com articles as clips, which I probably should do that. It's really just getting around to it. It's not really an actual hesitation. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos because that helps me with the almighty YouTube algorithm. If you want to support me even further outside of Google, there should be a link to Patreon down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.